Welcome to the Outlet with Kei-Touch, the podcast. Today, we are talking about the Mecca of Comedy, the rise of stand-up comedy in Washington, D.C. Look, you can catch this on Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and just a word for the wise, Tubi is free, but any platform you want to catch this on, you should do it. It is phenomenal. It is a great documentary. And if you're like me, you want to know how things went down. Why does DC have so many comedians? I mean, it's something. I always tell Black people, just in general, if you can't make it in DC, you can't make it anywhere in the United States of America. And this is true for comedy as well. Today, some of the stars that are on the Mecca of Comedy are joining me. First up, Sylvia Traymore Morrison. First Black female impressionist. First Black female writer for Saturday Night Live. She hosted the Roast of the Champ. Yes, no one other than Muhammad Ali, the greatest, at the legendary Apollo Theater. She's a comedian, an author, and just an amazing person. And then we have Andy Evans. He is a stand-up comic, author, and playwright. Look, we're going to call him today the comedy counselor.
Hello.
Welcome to the Outlet with Kei-Touch.
Kei-Touch, you know I'm always happy to be with you. I'm always happy. I love your energy. I love how you bring it. I love how you are so respectful and you have all of your information. It's just in check. You don't play. You come to tell people a story. You bring it. Yes, you do. So thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, sounds like Sylvia Traymore Morrison over there talking.
That's me, Andy. How you doing? Look, I've watched the Mecca of Comedy. I'm sorry, Kei-Touch. I just want to tell them this. I watched the Mecca of every comedian seemed like they talked about you and what you did for them and how you brought forth the whole, I was like, come on, Andy.
I'm waiting for him to send money, okay? Quit talking, send cash.
So, Andy, you going to put out ways for them to donate. I'll give you a chance to do that because, man, I learned so much watching that. I learned so much watching that. And, Andy, you said on the Mecca of Comedy that DC has the most sophisticated crowds. Does that equate to hardest to make laugh because this is a serious, educated town?
Yeah, well, actually, I kind of got that from Berry Gordy. Came to Washington when they reopened the Howard Theater, and he got the Lifetime Achievement Award. It was given to him by Smokey Robinson. And he said the first place he sent Motown back in the 70s was Washington, D.C. Because if you could make it in D.C., you could make it anywhere in the country. And the reason why he said that was because D.C. have seen the best of everything. So if you was really original and you was really different and you had something unique, then the crowd will accept you, but you couldn't be fake. I mean, think about this. The Apollo was opened in 1930. The Howard Theater opened in 1910, which means all the greats back at Louis Armstrong and all Bessie Smith and all the great comedians and performers, they was coming to the Howard Theater and they said it was like coming home because all the segregation that was going on, all the Jim Crow laws that was happening. So, yeah, D.C. is one of the places that's truly unique. And then I'll add this to it. Not only is it the nation's capital where you have some of the most sophisticated politicians and a city that is wrapped around a Black community, that's why it's called Chocolate City. And when you think about it, when you really think about it, what makes DC so unique is that it has a high level of sophisticated thinking and discussions going on all the time in DC because we constantly dealing with the federal government, the politicians, and just pure survival in the Black community in terms of what we have to go through. So comedy for a comedian, you got a lot of stuff to pull from. You can talk on a lot of different platforms. And I found out that that's why when you look at what Sylvia was able to do and myself, was that we was playing both sides of the bridge. We would run over to the white club and then haul-tail over to the black club. And you had to have a set for each of them. So it teaches you how to write on a broader scale than just for one particular thing or just to your culture, but to a broader culture.
That's great, Andy. Sylvia, tell me your thoughts about DC being the Mecca of comedy, and why do you think that is?
I just know when I first started doing comedy, of course, this is my home. DC is my home. So every time I would go out looking for a platform, there really were no platforms at the time when I first started, other than one or two white clubs. And they weren't really designed for somebody to look like me. And every time I'd see a new comic come on board, they would be just amazing. Just amazing. Like I remember the first time I saw Kevin Anthony and Danny Williams. Those were the first two comics that I knew out of the DC area. And we hadn't even graduated yet to some of the more popular comics who, by the way, several of them came under the guise of Andy Evans. Wanda Sykes, Dave Chappelle, Martin Lawrence, he's friends with all of them. And when I saw that this man that we have on this podcast right now has footage, Kei, of all these comics from way back in the day. And excuse me, I was like, where did you how did you say? And he still has it. I'm telling you, he probably has a fortune worth of, he has Martin on, some of it you saw on the Mecca of Comedy, because Andy Evans was the man, is the man. He had, it just let me know that every time he said something about a comic, I knew that they had to be something, because Andy didn't, he just wasn't going to recommend you for nothing or take you nowhere unless he could put his thumb on it and say, okay, they're okay. Which is what he did for me. I couldn't get on the stage. And he said, I tell you what you do. There's a black club up Georgia Avenue called Ibex.
Yes.
Go up to Ibex and tell Ron Green, who runs Ibex, that I sent you. And he's going to let you get on stage. And sure enough, Andy told the truth. When I got there, Ron said, Andy Evans sent you? And he said, well, sure, you can get on the stage, because I couldn't get on any stages, Kei. We had Garvin's and we had Dan Harris's, the Comedy Cafe. I may have done the Garvin's once and the Comedy Cafe twice. Three times. So that's my take on it.
Kei, I just want to first thank you for having me on your show. I really appreciate that. And I had just came back off vacation, and I've been to the island, and I just got back from the island on vacation. And I rushed from the island just to be here. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was on Rhode Island Avenue.
Yeah, that was a rush, right? Especially during rush hour. I don't know how far you had to go, but that was funny. Andy, talk to me about the Garvin's Club. That was heavily mentioned on the Mecca of Comedy, the rise of stand-up comedy in Washington, D.C. Streaming now on Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and Tubi. Yes, Andy, talk to me about the Garvin's Club.
Oh, Kei, you really touched on something, and I guess that's why they call you Kei-Touch. Sometimes you touch on something that people know it's been part of DC. We just didn't know the history. You know what I mean? It's kind of like DC is known for having a lot of black churches, and we got gospel like you would not believe in the city, and jazz. Some of the great jazz performers You know, I used to love jazz shows because, you know, the jazz guys were so cool. You know, the guy would come out and say, I'd like to thank y'all for coming to the show. And on drums, we got Sonny Smith. And on stand-up bass, we got St. Louis from St. Louis. And on piano, we got Left Foot Shorty. And we'd like to do an original song for you called That Bow-Legged Bitch. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. But, you know, we're a city where you get on Metro and you may be standing beside a lawyer, a doctor, a politician, and you may be just a janitor because we all bunched in here together. So you hear a lot of conversations. And I think comics pick up what's going on right now in society. And that's what makes people want to hear a kind of a different twist. And the good ones, the really good ones who want to come with a message sometime, comedy can be a little uncomfortable. But look at Paul Mooney. I mean, he used to make white people squirm, but they would pack the house just to hear him say some things that they know that he was not necessarily talking about them, but he was talking about their ancestors. And you know, who does that in this country other than Black people, make you live what reality is from a humorous perspective? It got us through slavery. You know, it was a slave, you know, back in the day, back in them cotton fields when the master went in the house, you know, them slaves had a stage where they stood up and did jokes about the old master and his woman. I got to believe that it's kind of like what makes DC special is that we're not like New York where you got 8 million, but we got 700,000 and everybody kind of interacts at some point. You can't get away from us. You can't get away from Black folks. Do you know, Keisha, did you know, Kia, that the Klan marched in DC back in 1920? Did you know that?
No.
Yes, they did march right down Pennsylvania Avenue. And Black men did not try to beat them up. They didn't
were there any comics in that march?
Because actually, look, they were the real Grand Dragons. And when they marched by, one brother was standing up there going, "Hey, want to buy some sheets? Yeah, come on back right in the alley. I got some king size, large, regular." Because we business people. You can come to DC with any kind of, let's say, philosophy, and you can go into a comedy club, and it's going to humanize you because it's going to make you just like everybody else. Okay. You got to sit there and take it. And sometimes we need some things to humble us because the Almighty gets us to a point we believe that we're smarter than whatever created us. So sometimes you need comedy to bring you down, let you realize you know better than nobody else, and you got to learn to laugh at it.
Andy, that's amazing because the whole time you were talking, I was thinking about the late, great, legendary Dick Gregory.
Yes.
And how he did comedy.
Yes.
And how he made white people laugh at themselves. And especially when he had his big breakthrough with Hugh Hefner's club. And they were terrified for him because they had all these Southern guys that came up and he was performing. And he said one joke that I'll never forget. He said he was sitting at a lunch counter and some white men walked up to him when he got his chicken and said, "Whatever you do to that chicken, boy, I'm going to do to you." And he picked up the chicken and kissed it and said, "Pucker up, boys." And I was like, oh my gosh, that is hilarious. That is hilarious. And so what you were saying, it just really resonated. And I know a lot of people know Dick Gregory as an activist, but he broke barriers. And I have to mention him because one, he was a longtime DC resident. And two, one of the greats out of DC, I feel has a lot of his style. And that's Dave Chappelle.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
Let me add one thing about breaking barriers. that people forget about Dick Gregory. Dick Gregory hired Sylvia Traymore to host a roast back in the time when no such thing as a female being a host of a male dominant roast. He had never seen her. He only knew that somebody told him that this lady was in Miss Black America and she was talented. So he really broke a whole barrier. He didn't ask nobody. He put her on stage, didn't give her no script. So we tell him how Dick just pulled you in out of nowhere.
Oh my God. Well, first of all, as a comic, I was gonna crash the roast. We were in New York City because this was taking place at the Apollo. I was gonna crash the roast. I didn't care what nobody said, what they thought, how they felt. No. I will be at that roast because there were going to be so many people there that I needed to just be around. His roast panel, actually Richard Pryor was supposed to host the roast. I don't know if you said that or not, Andy, but yeah, Richard Pryor was supposed to host it. He called and said he couldn't make it. So one of the girls that knew Mr. Gregory said nobody was in the DC area that day that could have come and replaced Richard Pryor. So she told him about me, and he said, bring her in. And when I got there, there was, oh my God, Harry Belafonte.
Wow.
There was LaWanda Page. There was Fred Williamson. There was Jim Brown. There were all these people, Dick Cavett, all of these people on the roast panel. And I had no script whatsoever.
How'd you deal with all that testosterone in that room? All those macho men. And
oh my God. You know what, Andy? I'm going to tell you the truth. Here's what happened. When I had to introduce Harry Belafonte, and this got me some points in the country. I heard all I could hear and think of when I said, ladies and gentlemen, Harry Belafonte. Hey, oh, daylight come and you wanna go home. That's all I could hear in my head. And he was young. He was, this was back in the late 70s, like 79, and everybody was in their prime of everything. And It was the Muhammad Ali roast. No other fighter. No, I'm the only female that's ever hosted a major roast. I'm her. You're looking at her. And I just recently started feeling comfortable telling people about my history, because if I don't tell it, nobody knows my history like me. And that was a big deal. So I was, when they came up with this idea for the Mecca of Comedy, I was so excited that Parrish Smith, who is the person who came up with the idea, who wanted to do this, I thought, and I'm gonna be honest, Kei, this might be a little tough for me to say on your show, but I think you'll like it. I was looking for Dave Chappelle or Martin Lawrence or Wanda Sykes or one of them to do something like this. They were in position, they knew everybody. I figured that they would somehow or another get all the comics together because we all grew up together. Everybody was, right here in DC. And when it didn't happen and Parrish Smith came along, me personally, I was absolutely delighted because I kept thinking, what if they don't tell the story while I'm still living, because we're all aging. And when Parrish did it, it was such a great job. As I was just so thrilled that he put that out. So yeah, I got a chance to explain some of my history on the Mecca of Comedy. I got a chance to hear what some of the other comics felt about me. We all decided that Andy was the daggone lead voice in comedy on the Mecca of Comedy, because every one of those comics had something absolutely wonderful to say about him, and I was happy for that. I really was.
It's part of it, isn't it unique? And you think about it, Kia, that even in radio and television, comedians begin to make an impact. Look at what happened when syndication came along. Back when I was coming up, you had these real smooth talking DJs, and they were all hot guys that girls love. Mm-hmm. Now, if you listen to every radio show that comes on in the morning, it's a comedian, either the host or the co-host. I mean, from Tom Joyner's show, from Steve Harvey's show, from what's my man down in Atlanta, Sylvia?
Russ Parr.
All of these shows now recognize that comedy works well with the other arts. You know, if you do a show and you got a band, you can throw a comic on in front of it. Comedians tend to be able to be very mobile. So whatever's going on, like Sylvia's heading off to a conference in Austin, Texas. Hey, hey, by the way, Austin, Texas, Sylvia's coming that way. And there's a religious comedy. I mean, a religious conference. But comedians who know how to write clean stuff, like Sylvia, can perform for an all Christian audience and kill. And the ones of us like myself and Sylvia who has played more than just, say, the inner city clubs, where the comedy may be a little more Def Jam-ish, a little more risque, it's okay. But you can't go to your aunt's conference and call her no B. Nah, it ain't gonna happen. Nah. You gotta respect that.
I said, that brings me to Tony Perkins. I did not know Tony Perkins was a comedian. And
yes.
On the Mecca of Comedy, they said, you know, he was described as the Black Johnny Carson. So all I've known Tony Perkins for was on the news here, doing the weather, telling, you know, and he was funny. He has a personality. And even on Donnie Simpson's show, Donnie Simpson and Tony Perkins. And I'm like, oh, I get it. Okay, that's why. Okay, he makes me laugh.
That's why he got that slick comedy. Donnie saw him in a comedy club. Me and Tony kind of started around about the same time. And Tony told me, he said, Donnie Simpson offered him a full-time job. And I was like, well, what kind of money? And he was talking about like, you know, 40, 50 grand back during that time, back in the early 80s, when comics were lucky if we got $50 a night. And I was like, hey, Tony, you got to take that money. Well, Tony brought that humor to Donnie's show, but what he did was he also prepared himself to go up to the next level, end up being a news anchor for the weather, and then he moved right up into Fox, where he became a major primetime person. But it was always because Tony knew how just to toe the line on news without crossing over and saying something to get the station sued. You know, you can't sometimes watch how you say what you say, especially nowadays when we got politicians can get people put off the air just because they say something that's offensive to some national politician. That can cause a lot of problems. So Tony had a good role, but he never stopped doing stand-up. In fact, I pulled him into the Solar Comedy, which I shot in 1987. He was already on television and as the host of my first show. And on that first show, I had Martin Lawrence, Tommy Davidson, Chris Thomas, Fat Doctor. All of those guys was on the show, and Tony Perkins came in to host it for me. And I was just trying to show that DC had a unique group of comedians, and we just didn't get the same exposure to the New York comics, because most people think about politics when they think about DC.
And you know what, Andy, I'm glad you brought that up, especially the money part, that when you said that the $50,000, you know, I think the difference today as opposed to then, you know, we would do shows hoping for an opportunity to be seen, whether we got paid or not. You know, my first two shows at the Comedy Cafe, I got paid my first show a Coca-Cola, and the second show I got a Coca-Cola and $5.
And you drink Diet Coke. I'm shocked you drink.
I do, but what I'm saying that you just never knew back then who was going to be in the audience. Yes, you just never knew. Those first two shows, one I opened for Elaine Boozler, and the second one I opened for Rosie O'Donnell.
Yes.
So, you know, and so you could get called back by any of those people because of the level of comedy in DC at that time, especially. Everybody was coming to this town to come to the audience and see the comedians because they were outright hilarious.
Think about how Moms Mabley who Sylvia, by the way, plays in my play, The Return of Jackie Moms Mabley. But think about how Moms actually, she moved her whole family from Brevard, North Carolina to Washington, D.C. because it was a chocolate town and her mother lived down in the South so long. She wanted to bring her family up so that they could experience this culture, the Black culture that was D.C. They had Black Broadway from U Street and 7th Street all up and down. And Moms was a legend during that time, but she made D.C. a home. In fact, she bought 3 houses and was getting awards from the police department for community service. That's how active she was in this town. And that's how comfortable. And look, Ella Fitzgerald got locked up for coming in a jazz club in the front door. They would lock her up. But when she came to D.C., she stayed at the best hotels. She was treated with royalty. And that was the feeling that the greats got when they came to Chocolate City. They felt like they was home. And that's what makes this city so special for all entertainers. Even if you're on a comedy tour, it's coming through D.C. It's got to come here. And some people want to
argue. If they come to D.C., Andy, Kei-Touch gonna be right there because she don't miss a beat. She does not miss a beat. I love it when I see her. She just strolling by. Hey, Sylvia, I'm like, is that Kei-Touch? So I believe, Kei-Touch, you've been to enough comedy shows here to see the magnitude of some of the people who perform on these stages. And it's kind of refreshing to know that they're right from out of this town, So.
It's a beautiful thing. It's It's interesting. Part of my father's childhood was in Peoria, Illinois. He didn't know Richard Pryor personally, but his older cousin who he was living with, he knew him. So, and it's just interesting about comedians and taking your life experience, things you've been through, and make fun of yourself. And Richard Pryor was amazing at that. I was watching Raw the other day. I actually own a couple of his live shows. I still have DVDs, and those things are classics. Classics.
Yes. Do you have
give me one?
Oh my God.
This is the vinyl record. I inherited my father's vinyl collection. He had thousands of vinyl records, and I haven't been through all of them, but I found this. I found some Richard Pryors. I found old Bill Cosby. I mean, just amazing. And I'm like, I have to digitize this one.
Do you have an 8-track player? Do you have one?
I don't have an 8-track, but I inherited a reel-to-reel that works. Which is pretty amazing. Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. So it's just interesting. All of the history you were just talking about Moms Mabley,
right?
And Sylvia playing the return of Jackie Moms Mabley.
And let me say a quick thing about that play. The play is called The Return of Jackie Moms Mabley and 7 Great Divas. And so Sylvia not only brings back, because she's the first Black female impressionist in the country, she brings them back alive where you feel like you're in the room with them. But not only does she does Moms, Mom has some nostalgia moments where she remembers some of the great women performers and singers that was around during her time. And Sylvia, as the lights go down, she come back as Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Billie Holiday, Josephine Baker, Nancy Wilson, Aretha Franklin, and Pearl Bailey. And you would think that they're actually back live. All of them are people who have passed. But Sylvia give you that feeling, not just the songs that they sang, but you almost feel like you're looking at Nancy Wilson when you see it, because Sylvia has a way of picking up the little things about them that you remember. And I'm trying to add to it Phyllis Hyman.
Wow.
Because Sylvia, give me a little Phyllis Hyman.
Oh, you caught me off guard, but I don't care about being off guard.
Go for it.
I'm trying to think of the good song that Phyllis does.
The one that I like.
I forgot the name of it, Andy. I forgot the whole daggone song.
What do you mean you? I gotta find somebody else on my plate.
No, it's just that I was, you know what?
Okay,
I said, watch she asked me to do Sarah Vaughan. I said, watch she asked me to bring Sarah Vaughan, and you hit me with Phyllis Hyman.
I didn't ask the question though, so it's not on me, Sylvia.
Oh.
No, I'm only kidding because we don't do we do some great women like do Sarah Vaughan for me, Sylvia.
Okay, but now that I thought about the Phyllis Hyman song, I remember what it was.
Let me hear it.
Somewhere in my lifetime, you've been here with me.
Come on, girl.
Oh, so close to me.
I hear you, baby.
Somewhere in my lifetime.
See, that's why we know. That's
the whole song, Kei-Touch. The whole
Sylvia
song
does all of those women, and I'm telling you, it's amazing how her voice can change, and she gets caught up in the energy. One of the great acts she does is Josephine Baker, and she sings her song in French, and she sings it in English. And I'm telling you, you have to see Sylvia in not only in the costume, but the whole way she sings that song. I believe this play is going to not only show the greatness of Sylvia, but the play is educational because it talks about the struggle that Black women back in the 40s and 50s had to go through just to perform on the road, because there was the danger of a Black woman out there on her own was really dangerous. But these women struggled, just like Billie Holiday. They locked up a lot of times. But all of these people, all of these women had to go through some tough times to become the divas that they are. So not only do we not only do we do the performing, during the course of the play, we actually show them, and the voiceover talks about from whence they came, how they got there, what sorority they belong to, if they're part of a sorority, how they struggled to become great, so that you walk out of there not only learning something as well as hearing and entertainment. It's a beautiful kind of wrap around Black women and their actual contribution to the arts. Can I get a witness, Sylvia Traymore Morrison?
Okay. Yes, you can. I'm a witness. Yes.
Yes. So you have to invite me out next time you do the return of Jackie Mom's Baby. Yes. Gotta have me out there. And I want to switch gears real quick. You two are always helping other comedians, sewing into them. It always bothers me when I see Black people not helping one another, because that's not our culture. In the 40s, 50s, during the Great Migration, we helped each other. We helped our families move. They stayed with each other. They helped them get jobs. So tell me the importance of sewing into someone else, because a lot of times it seems that people are scared. Oh, you may pass them. But to me, I just believe in helping other people.
Yes.
And you'll always be blessed, period, when you're helping others. And just talk to me, each of you, your thoughts on sewing into the next generation of comedians and comedians in general.
Yes. Well, you know, Kia, just having us on your show is part of what you're just doing, about sharing your platform with us to talk about that history. Right. Sylvia's always, she had Monique telling Monique, anytime a Black female comic come in, please give her some time. And Monique was doing it, and some of the women were, oh my God. She was like, because I love Sylvia so much, I'm gonna put them on the stage. Some of them wasn't even ready, but she gave them the stage anyway.
Gave them the stage. Yes, she did.
That's what it's all. David Chappelle was 15 when I took him on the road, and to the date, when I talked to him, the reason why we still have that connection is I saw him speaking on his generation, not with the older comics, what we were talking about. I just told him, don't try to mimic us. Talk about the things that you're concerned in your generation at your age. And I think because he took off in that direction as opposed to trying to sound like a dude that's hip and out there, he came out like the guy who was really young, not 100% sure, insecure, and he reflected that in his comedy. Same thing with Wanda. I took on the role with me because I felt she had something to say, and she was a little dynamite.
Wanda,
and as she grew, she kept evolving, and pretty soon she became pretty much a person who has her own platform to do what she wants to do.
Okay, yeah.
And same thing with Sylvia. These kind of entertainers who, if you give them a stage, that's one thing I liked about Sylvia. Sylvia has more fun performer than anybody I know. If you ain't really having fun doing it, and you're only doing it just for the money, you may not always have a good experience. But if you enjoy your audience and they know that you're having a good time, they're going to have a good time. And that's why comedy, I know Kamala Harris is getting to be known because they're calling her Laughing Kamala. I said, watch out. She going to need some comedians on her stage. We're going to go to the White House. That's what we're going to do.
Don't start it, Andy, because you know I will be right there. But I want to call out two female comedians who really have been looking out for me these last couple of years, because for years and years and years I wondered why I wasn't connecting with some of the female comedians. But I want to say a special shout out, first of all, to Monique. I got to give Monique she promised me back when I met her in 2000, I think it was 19 or whenever. She said, everywhere I go, if I do an interview, I'm going to call your name because they all need to know your name. And she has kept her word. And then I want to, even though Sybil Wilkes is not a comedian, Sybil Wilkes was responsible for Sherry Shepherd bringing me on her show. And ever since Sherry Shepherd had me on her show, first of all, I want to say thank you, Sherry. It kind of changed the whole trajectory of my career, being on her show to a degree. And it's like Sherry has not only had me on her show, but she's spoken of me. She did a whole thing on me on Two Funny Mamas. She has had me back when they went on vacation. They showed the film where I was on. So I got to thank people like Sherry Shepherd and Monique. And you know, of course, like I said, Sybil Wilkes, John Murray. It's like I've always been that person. If a female comes and asks me if they can be on my show, I try to make a way for them to be on the show. Even though I can't pay them most of the time because I'm just, down through the years, I was just barely getting paid. I had one person tell me, you wouldn't share your stages with us. And it's like, I was hanging on those stages by a string. How are you going to go out with Whitney Houston and tell Whitney, oh, I got some other people I want to bring on your show?
No.
Can't do that. I wanted to perform with Whitney too. And you ain't recommend none of us. I'm like, I was just about ready to kick me off. You think I'm gonna go in there and say, yeah, I got a couple of, I'm gonna bring, look, I got some other people I want you to have on the show with me. But I think it's important. I think it really is important for us to share. I've always done whatever I could, and I take pride in that. Like I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, Kei-Touch, having me. I've been on your show a few times. And it's for me, it makes me respect myself to know that you, somebody who's in the business and you have a platform, you can share it whenever you want to. You've had me back several times. So I got to salute you on that one. Thank you so much. And that's about sharing, because you bring a lot of people on your show who may not get the opportunity to be heard or seen. So when I heard I was going to be on here with Andy Evans, I said, "Oh, she don't know. She bringing somebody on here." Oh, Lord.
Hey, Sylvia, the reason why Kei-Touch is doing that, she knows Oprah got to give it up. And they got to find somebody to fill that spot. That's just right there. There you go. Oprah made $2 billion. It's time for her to give it up and let
But
the
you don't
young
have to give it
sisters
up.
come in.
Just open it. Just keep the door open. That's all.
Yes.
Look, look. I'm an old soul, right? And I know y'all may remember this James Brown song. He said, "I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door, and I'll get it myself." That's how I feel about things. Just open up the door. So Sylvia, Andy, if you need someone to introduce you, host, whatever, call your girl. I got you.
Yes. Well, listen, the good thing about connecting and doing things together, it end up being things that you continue to follow up on. And I'm glad because we should be collaborating. So I'm always open to new ideas and new possibilities. And Sylvia knows that as well as. So we always have them times when it was just close the doors and let's come up with some great ideas.
Yeah.
And I'm been fortunate enough to be one of the guys been around a long time and still have that fire in my gut to perform, to write, and to support other entertainers, because you are, my dear, also a entertainer. And that's what it's not just. It's the ability to sit on there and give up that energy, because sometimes the news is so bad. We need some new faces to talk about some things so Black folks don't feel like everything is gloom and doom.
That's right.
And God knows part of our culture has always been people like young sister like you coming out and stepping out there and bringing some good news.
Right. That's right. That's real.
I
That's
appreciate it. And this is coming from some DC legends, comic legends. I mean, it's amazing. The Mecca of Comedy, the rise of stand-up comedy in Washington, D.C., streaming on Amazon Prime Video, Apple TV, and Tubi for free. You don't want to miss this. And the thing is, if you're a rising comedian, you're thinking about being a comedian, if you want to know, if you're a history buff, you want to know about Black history, DC history, you need to watch this. This is phenomenal. You have to know your history to move forward. Just so excited again to have Sylvia Traymore Morrison, first Black female impressionist, first Black female writer for SNL. She hosted the roast of the champ, Muhammad Ali, at the legendary Apollo Theater. She also opened up for Whitney Houston. Oh my goodness. Comedian, author, so many things. Please follow her. Let me give out her information at Sylvia T. Morrison on IG and X, and Sylvia Traymore Morrison on Facebook, and also Mr. Andy Evans, stand-up comic, author, playwright, and mentor, most importantly. Comedy counselor on IG, at Andy Evans on Facebook. You guys are amazing, living legends. Thank you for keeping us laughing.
Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yes.
And that lovely lady over there, Sylvia Traymore, thank you for being in my play too. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. But in the words of Wendy Williams, she would say to Kei-Touch, "Oh my God! Oh my, okay. First of all, how you doing? Kei-Touch, keep doing this, baby, because you are sending fire across the waves. Okay. I love you.
I love you too, Wendy. All right, love you too, Sylvia. Look us out, let me Kei-Touch the podcast.